Hey, second grade, I hope you enjoyed your first full week of online learning. This starts your second full week of online learning. It also starts your fairy tale review week. With that being said, you all had the option or opportunity to vote last week between The Fisherman and His Wife, The Emperor's New Clothes, and Beauty and the Beast. And let me tell you, it was a super close race. I think I recounted maybe 3 or 4 times. And so before I continue this lesson, your roll please. The winner who had the most votes last week is The Emperor's New Clothes. Now I know some of you may be a little bummed because you really wanted Beauty and the Beast or The Fisherman and His Wife. But I will actually be able to show you a recording of those later in the week from another second grade teacher, a friend of mine. We can put those on YouTube and you can listen to those later this week. But for today, let's get started with our review of The Emperor's New Clothes. Now remember, a fairy tale is fiction or fantasy, so it's not real. And there are story elements in a fairy tale. So let's review those story elements because I want you to listen for those through all the fairy tales that you'll hear this week. The first one I want you to listen for is fairy tales begin with my turn, once upon a time, your turn, once upon a time. They also have royal characters. So my turn, royal characters, your turn, royal characters. And that might be people or it actually might be animals. A fairy tale also normally has a problem and a solution. So my turn, problem, your turn, problem. My turn, solution, your turn, solution. There's always going to be a good part and a bad part. And then normally a fairy tale, you're going to hear them say, and they all lived happily ever after. So most fairy tales do have a happy ending. Now those are the story elements I want you to listen for, not only today, but also for all the fairy tales you listen to this week. They might be ones I share through YouTube, or they may be ones that you read on my own. Today's fairy tale, there's 2 parts I want you to really listen for. And one is about the characters. I want you to listen to what the characters are pretending about. What do they pretend to see or pretend to know? And I bet you already know that answer. But the other question I want you to listen for is why is the emperor in his underwear? So 2 questions. Listen for what the characters are pretending or what they're pretending to know. And listen for why the emperor is in his underwear. So let's get started. Many years ago, there was an emperor who loved fine clothes. Now remember, an emperor is almost like a king of a country, and fine clothes means super nice clothes. He did not care for hunting. He did not care for plays or opera. He was no lover of gourmet food. His only ambition was always to be well dressed. He had a different coat for every hour of the day. He loved to walk about and show off his fancy outfits. One day, 2 strangers arrived in town. They were swindlers. Now remember, a swindler is someone who tries to trick you. They were swindlers who pretended to be master weavers of a faraway land. Now remember, a weaver is someone who weaves or sews clothing. They told the emperor they could weave the most beautiful cloth in the world. They said that not only was their cloth beautiful, it was also magical. That's actually another element of a fairy tale, magic. It was specially woven so that only the most intelligent people could see it. Those who were ignorant could stare at the cloth all day and not see a thing. So remember, the word intelligent means very smart. They use their wisdom. They're full of knowledge. Ignorant is an anonym or opposite, meaning they do not have much knowledge. The emperor said, my turn, astonishing, your turn, astonishing. That means this is exciting. I will have these men make a suit for me, and when it's done, I will figure out who can see it. That way, I will be able to tell which of these men who serve me are, my turn, intelligent, your turn, intelligent, and which are fools. So the emperor gave the swindlers a purse filled with gold coins and told them to begin weaving the magic cloth right away. swindlers set up 2 weaving looms and pretended to be weaving their wonderful cloth, but they had nothing at all on their looms. So already be thinking about what the characters are going to pretend to see. After the first few days, the emperor grew curious. He was wondering what was happening. He was curious to see the cloth himself. At first, he thought he might check up on the weavers himself. But then he remembered what they said. Only intelligent people could see the cloth. He was confident that he was smart. There could be little doubt of that. But what if he was not? What if he could not see the cloth? Just to be on the safe side, he decided to send the prime minister to have a look. Now, the prime minister during this time was a very important advisor to the emperor. He is very intelligent, said the king. If he can't see the cloth, I dare say nobody can. So the emperor called for the prime minister and sent him to check upon the weavers. The prime minister went to the room and peeked in. The 2 swindlers were working away at their looms. Okay, be thinking, what are these characters going to pretend to see? Prime Minister, one of the swindlers called out. You are welcome. Come in, come see the cloth and what we have produced. So the man waved his hand over the empty loom and said, isn't it beautiful? So be thinking, what are they pretending to see? The prime minister squinted and he rubbed his head. He did not see any cloth at all, but he did not dare to admit it. That would mean he was a fool. So he pretended to see the cloth. Yes, said the prime minister, it is the most beautiful indeed. I like it very much. Keep up the great work. So think about it. What is he pretending to see? The prime minister turned to leave, but the second swindler called out to him, wait, don't go. You must not leave without touching the cloth. I think you will be most impressed. We were just saying that this is the softest cloth we have ever created. So the prime minister hesitated for a moment, and then he said, oh, of course, and he walked up to one of the looms. He reached out his hand, and he rubbed his fingers together in the area where he thought the cloth must be. He could feel nothing. He could not feel anything. But he said, oh, it is so soft. Indeed. Why, it's lighter than air. Thank you, said the first swindler. We are pleased with what we have done, and we're making very good progress too. But we need a little more money for thread and other materials. Of course you understand. Of course, said the prime minister. So he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a little purse or bag of coins and he handed it over to the swindlers. The prime minister went back to the emperor and told him that the cloth was quite lovely and as soft as it can be. He said he was confident that the emperor would like it. That was what the emperor had really hoped to hear. So the next day he went to have a look for himself. After all, if his prime minister had seen the cloth, surely he could see it too. But when he stepped into the room where the 2 men had set up their looms, the emperor saw nothing on the looms. This is terrible, he thought. I don't see anything at all. What can this mean? If the prime minister saw the cloth, it must be there. Then why can't I see it? Am I stupid? Am I fit to be an emperor? That would be the most dreadful thing that could happen to me. But out loud he says, it's magnificent, truly magnificent. Why, I have never seen cloth so lovely. Now class, what is he pretending to see it? And be thinking not only what is it, but why? Why is he pretending to see it? Shall we go ahead and make you a suit then, your majesty? Oh, yes, by all means, said the emperor. You can get my measurements from the royal tailor. Now remember, a tailor is someone who actually makes clothes. And so that night, the two swindlers, they sat up late into the night pretending to work on the suit. They wove more invisible cloth. My turn, invisible, and your turn. That means they couldn't see it. They cut the air with scissors, and they stitched the wind with a threadless needle. Other noblemen, men of the court, or friends of the emperor, came into my turn. Inspect, your turn. Good job. That means to see or check on the cloth. And all of them pretended to be able to see it. I hope you heard that, class. They pretended to be able to see it, for they did not wish to appear stupid. Soon the whole town was talking about the wonderful cloth and the emperor's new suit. At last, the day came when the emperor was to wear his new clothes in public. The two swindlers presented themselves in the emperor's dressing room at daybreak. Here is the jacket, said the first swindler, holding up an empty hanger. And here are the pants, said the other, holding one hand in the air. What do you think of them? All of the emperor's men agreed that the new clothes were splendid. The emperor took off his clothes, and the two swindlers pretended to help him put on the make-believe garments. Slip your right leg in here, your majesty. That's it. Now your left leg. Good. Now I must tell you, these pants are not like regular pants. The fabric is so light and airy that it feels like you're wearing nothing at all. But that is the beauty of them. The men helped the emperor put on his imaginary clothes. And then they led him back to look at his looking glass. How handsome you look, your majesty, said one of the swindlers. All of the men and helpers nodded their head in agreement. So, as you can see here, the emperor had marched out of his dressing room, and he made his way out to in front of the palace, followed by many advisors and many servants. He marched down the main street of the town with soldiers and bodyguards all around. Now, let's think about this for just a moment. Why won't anyone tell the emperor that he's really in his underwear? Think about that for a little bit. The streets that he walked down were lined with great crowds. Everyone had heard about the emperor's new clothes. They were made of magic fabric that only the wise could see. How lovely the emperor's new clothes are, one man said, and how well they fit him, added a woman. None of them would admit they could not see a thing. Why don't the people say anything to him about this, class? And so, the emperor marched on through the street, bursting with pride, showing off his brilliant new suit to everyone in the land. Much to his surprise, they all seemed to see what he could not. And so he was not going to be the one to tell them. And just then, a young child stepped out of the crowd and cried out, "He hasn't got anything on! He's in his underwear!" A hush fell over the crowd. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. And then everyone began to whisper, "The child is right. The emperor is not wearing a thing." And the people began to giggle and they laughed until they cried. "He hasn't got anything on." At last the emperor knew he had been tricked. He tried to march back to the palace as proudly as ever. But he was blushing from head to toe, as everyone could plainly see. I want to pause right here because when we have our Google Meet this week, we'll pick up at this point. I want you to think about this. Why do you think the emperor continued to walk through the town? And not only that, but what would you do? What would you do at this point, finding out you were truly without clothes in the middle of all these people? So that is the end of the emperor's new clothes. Your two questions to think about today were, what were the characters pretending to see? You can even go deeper. Why were they pretending this? And then, of course, why was the emperor in his underwear? I would love to hear from you just like last week. You may respond to me in the comment section. You may respond to me just personally. Text me on the Dojo app. And then of course we will pick up here during our Google Meet. So with that being said, this is beginning our week of fairy tale review. I'm going to be sharing some fairy tales via YouTube with you this week that you can just listen to and enjoy. I really want you to listen for those elements that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. And then on top of that, we will meet and have our Google Meet and review this fairy tale and maybe a few more with some questionings. Oh, and I meant to tell you, I wore my fairy tale shirt for you all today, and it says never too old for fairy tales. So I was so excited when some of the other teachers and I discussed that we would review fairy tales this week because I love fairy tales too. Once again, I love you, I miss you. If you will respond to these questions, and then I will see you at our Google Meet this week. Bye.